Okay. Hello. Once again. Good evening. Good morning. I guess depending on what time zone you're in. Anyway, it's a great day to be a Gambian, and when things are happening in the world, I think we're duty bound to really find and check where Gambia stands in all of this, because globalization is a reality and we live in a global village, and what happens in the global village one way or another impacts the Gambia. So before I get into the topic, I think it's also good for us to understand the dynamics of why Russia and Ukraine are where they are today. At one point in life or time, there was a country called USSR, and that was the Union of the Soviet Socialist Republics. And the Belaruses, the Ukraines were all part of this. And that was basically the Russian Empire. Well, during Ronald Reagan's days, first when the Berlin Wall came down, and thereafter the Balkanization changed and USSR started breaking down. Well, that was then. And where do we find ourselves now as a world? We found ourselves whereby Putin believes Russia once again is a strong state, and it needs to reclaim what once used to be the Soviet republics. So starting with Ukraine, and others may suffer. And the reason why Putin is thinking this way, because the more these Soviet republics and also the countries that border Eastern Europe and Russia, the Croatians and others, are now part of NATO. Putin is of the view that Russian influence in these areas are waning and things are changing, and as soon as things change, it's going to be a weak Russia. And he now believes this is the time for him to start doing an acquisition of what was once Russia. One is an immoral act. Two, it destabilizes the whole world. and not only as it relates to the security arrangement of the world, but also the economic arrangement of the world. And that's why I am saying, what's in it for Gambia, and how will this impact the Gambia? Well, I think first and foremost, we can look at the benefits. War is ugly, but in as much as war is ugly, there is something to gain for others, and there will be misery for others. In a way, Gambia can benefit from this Ukraine-Russia issue. Why? Gambia is endowed with oil. We're still doing prospecting, which is fine. But right now, global supplies are beginning to be disrupted, not from places like Saudi Arabia, but places in the Arctic. Alaska will suffer from that. Russia will suffer. So therefore, the oil that will be needed to really pump the Asian economies and Western European economies cannot just be met by oil coming from the Arabian Peninsula. And this will cause disruption, and these supply disruptions can be something that will benefit the Gambia if Gambia really gets on the bandwagon. Right now, as we are into the prospecting of oil, and we still have some oil fields or prospecting blocks that are still out there, I think it is incumbent on our government to understand that these blocks now fetch a premium. Why are they fetching a premium? Everyone is trying to get oil south of the equator. Why? Because the maritime routes from the Arctic all the way to north of the equator are now very risky and dangerous, and the risk involved in moving vessels amid this Russian aggression will now force companies selling oil and transporting oil to put a premium on it. So this makes West African oil, African oil in general, to be lucrative and to be highly sought after. So if we really position ourselves, I think that's one great good advantage we have. So that's that as an advantage that we can really capitalize on to make sure that the oil we have can now be sold. Not the oil we have, the prospect of finding oil, the blocks we have can now go for a good premium, because a lot of big industrial companies and refineries want oil south of the equator more so than north of the equator, because you don't have to go through the Arctic, you don't have to go through Russia and other trade routes that are very, very dangerous. But on the other hand, I think the global economy is going to suffer, and suffer significantly. Why is the global economy going to suffer? Well, the global economy is going to suffer because over the past 36 months, the world has significantly suffered a global downturn as it relates to trade and economic growth due to the pandemic. And a lot of countries were just beginning to get out of the pandemic mode, and they have been adapting their economies to be resilient and also fine-tune them to know that, look, COVID is here to stay, but we need to find strategies to live with COVID. But this aggression coming by way of Russia onto Ukraine is opening serious and severe shortages of commodities, shortages of energy products, and shortages of food stocks globally. And once this happens, it's the poorest of the poor that will suffer. Because if another country wants oil and Gambia happens to want oil, the premium that those countries can pay for because of the volumes that they're going to buy, no broker or trader will want to look at the small volumes coming to Gambia of 5,000 to 6,000 metric tons a month. So this will affect our supply chain, and this supply disruption will cause price changes just in one product, energy product, fuel. So if this product happens to go up by 15-20%, guess what? Oil is a strategic product that runs across all economic activities in the Gambian economy. growing rice, growing vegetables, moving product A and product B from the port to markets, moving, you name it, people moving from point A to point B. So that will really exacerbate an already difficult economic situation that Gambia finds itself. And when that happens, price levels in the Gambia are going to go up, and up significantly. Once they go up, our staple rice will suffer. Our cash power will suffer because we use heavy fuel and diesel oil to light up our generators. So these are things that are going to impact the Gambia. But right now, I think the government of the Gambia should be duty-bound to see how they're going to make the Gambian economy resilient, and also how they're going to prepare the Gambian economy for a soft landing. Soft landing in the sense that these things are bound to happen and they're going to come. Does the government have ways and means to create a soft landing? What kind of policies are they going to come up with to create soft landing? These are things that right now, as we speak, the government of the Gambia must go to the drawing board and come up with solutions. We should not wait until things happen. Right now, government of the Gambia should be running scenarios, and these scenarios are: what if the price of rice internationally goes up by 20%? What if the logistics, shipping of rice from Southeast Asia, Vietnam, Thailand, and others go up by 30%? What if diesel and heavy fuel that we use to generate electricity go up by 30%? So these what-if scenarios are what the government of the Gambia should be putting on the drawing board with their analysts, with the policymakers, to make sure that they create a soft landing for the people of the Gambia. If not, these disruptions will further exacerbate the hardships that Gambians are going through right now. As we speak right now, things are very tough and hard for the Gambia, but it can get worse if we just allow everything to be on autopilot until doomsday gets closer. But also, I think it's a good time to look at our security arrangement as a country. What I'm about to say may not be pleasing to many. What I'm about to say may not go down well with many. But it's high time Gambia revisits its security policy, our national security policy. It is high time we reassess our security priorities. Nyang Jai is not a military man, but I can safely tell you that the Gambia doesn't need an army. Well, if Nyang Jai says that Gambia doesn't need an army, someone will just come outright and say, well, how are we going to protect ourselves? Good question. And I think the question also deserves an answer. See, sometimes geography puts you in a position whereby a lot of things that are conventional to many countries may not be conventional to you. And case in point is Gambia having an army. Gambia is not in need of an army for the simple fact that you have an army to stop and deter external aggression. Well, as you all know, Gambia is an enclave of Senegal. We only have about 32 to 35 kilometers, maximum 37 kilometers of land that is open to the Atlantic Ocean. So the rest of it is Senegal. What does that mean? It means no third country in the world can invade Gambia without coming through Senegal. So territorially, Gambia is insulated from external aggression by virtue of our geography. So that in itself has put, significant, has really put Gambia in an advantage whereby the need of an army is not something that we need. What do we need if we don't need an army? And by the way, Senegal is the only country that can invade the Gambia, but Senegal will never, ever invade the Gambia, not because they don't want to, not because they're not ambitious, but it comes with significant collateral damage for them. What's the collateral damage? In the Gambia, as we speak, we have nothing less than 5 to 650,000 Senegalese living here and walking out of the Gambia. What do I mean by that? I mean, they make their living here. So if Senegal were to intentionally pounce on Gambia on an invasion, the citizens of Senegal living in the Gambia will be the collateral damage. And this collateral damage is not what's good for Senegal, because we have seen incidences in the past. For example, a football match in Senegal where the Senegalese went out and bullied Gambians in Dakar. We not only burned their border post at Karang, we started rounding up Senegalese in Banjul, Serekunda, and the environs. So Senegal is not stupid, and Senegal will never dare to invade Gambia. It's not about military might. It's about human collateral damage that Senegal cannot afford. So that is not the case. So what do we need to prioritize in our national security arrangement? I think it's the Navy. The weak link to Gambia is our 37 to 45 kilometers of coastline, meaning that's the only place an external aggression can reach Gambia. So the investments we're making in the army are futile. We need to invest in a strong navy, and once we have a strong navy, they will guard the coast against aggression. They will guard the coast against poaching, significant poaching, meaning vessels coming into Gambia to poach, be it Chinese, Senegalese, you name it. So that's why our emphasis as it relates to our security arrangement, external security arrangement, should be more of the Navy and less of the Army. Army is a tool that is not good for the development of the Gambia. Once again, I am saying something that a lot of people won't like to hear, but it's the fact. An army is not a good tool for the development of this country. We have seen what the army costed Gambia over the years. So, if the government of the Gambia is serious, we can cut the budgets of the army. We can downsize the army, or shall I say, we can right-size the army to a small unit so that they can meet some of the international obligations we have, such as UN missions and other things. But the Gambia should not have an army as its focal point as it relates to its external security arrangement. Because today, like I said, no third country will march through Senegal to come into Gambia to invade the Gambia so that our army will be put to use. So the Navy is more effective in guarding our territorial integrity than that of the army. Having said that, then what do we need? We need a good police force and a paramilitary. The paramilitary will act just like an army. They will act just like an infantry, and they will do a lot of work that needs to be done as it relates to foots and boots on the ground. What we need is a strong navy to guard our coast. That is the weak link as it relates to the territorial integrity of this country. And I am of the view that if this aggression by Ukraine goes unabated, China will very soon consume Taiwan, and other smaller nations may be consumed by others who feel like they have the right to pounce on people. Equally, the global architecture as it relates to multilateralism needs to be revisited, i.e. the United Nations. Has the United Nations failed? Yes, the United Nations has failed and failed woefully. Why did the United Nations fail? Events have overtaken what the United Nations ought to be. We have countries like Nigeria. We have countries like South Africa. Why are these countries not having permanent seats at the Security Council? Where is the representation of the people of the South, i.e. Africa and beyond? So United Nations has now morphed into something that doesn't suit what we need as a global order. It cannot maintain the global order as it is because it doesn't reflect the aspirations of the people who formed the world. 70 years ago, 65 years ago, the world order was different from what it is now. We've seen aging superpowers and we've seen emerging would-be superpowers. China is one of those. But if you take the African continent, we may not have the military might, but we have the numbers as it relates to people. And this in itself should give the global order the need and the urgency to give Africa a seat at the Security Council as a permanent member. So that's why I am of the view that what's in this whole arrangement, if Africa is smart, i.e. the Russia-Ukraine debacle, a lot can come out of it. Africa now needs to stand up for Africa and demand to have a permanent seat so that the African interest will be safeguarded by Africa. We can no longer rely on others to safeguard our interests. So things are happening, but I also believe African leaders should also have their meetings to brainstorm the what-if scenarios of what is unfolding in the world right now. See, in this world, we either get consumed or we get up and do what's right for us. And the way things are going, African leaders are sitting idly watching whilst things are going. There will be economic ramifications, and these economic ramifications will affect the poor and vulnerable in most, if not all, African countries, because we will have supply chain disruptions due to energy prices and scarcity in basic commodities, which will in turn change price levels all over the world. And the poorest of the poor are the people who are going to bear the brunt of this malice. So I think it's time regional bodies, the ECOWASs, the African Union, get up, think, and see how to protect the nation states that constitute Africa. Equally, national governments like Gambia need to start brainstorming. How are they going to make these things work? How are they going to have a soft landing for the vulnerable and the poor as it relates to price hike, inflation, and lack of commodities, especially basic and energy commodities for the Gambia? The more we sit down and wait, the more we will have ad hoc, and if we have ad hoc, it's not going to help. And also, we all have been donor countries. Most of our African nations have been donor countries. But we need to realize with this Ukraine-Russia war, the dynamics are going to change in terms of the global order. The priority that was given to us as Africans is going to change, because now the West, particularly America, France, United Kingdom, they will tend to spend more on their security, and they will tend to spend more on their client states like Ukraine. So Gambia and other African countries and our programs of development will no longer be priorities. Will that stall our development agenda? Of course, and that's why we need to get out of this beggar mentality and be in charge of what takes this continent out of the doldrum and misery it finds itself. The development of this continent should be borne by the people of this continent. And that can happen. We can move funds from places where funds are overflowing to places where funds are in deficit, provided we have a continental financial architecture that will allow the movement of funds from one region to another with all the securities and collaterals needed. But all of this is lacking because the African leadership that we have today lack vision, lack foresight, lack fortitude, and lack conviction to make sure they make things move and make Africa great. Another thing I really want to talk about is independence. You know, most of us, we believe our forefathers fought for independence. I'm not talking about Gambia, I'm talking about Africa as a whole. We've seen the SWAPOs, we've seen the ANCs and others. Yes, it's true, they somehow fought for independence, but by the time they were fighting for independence, the colonial masters were already tired of running these colonies. Why were they tired? They were just getting out of World War II. All of these colonial masters were bankrupt, including England. That's why the Marshall Plan from the USA came to Western Europe to help them rebuild. So those people were already impoverished. So running a colony was a contingent liability that they couldn't do anymore. So what did they do? They loosened a little bit, allow us to be independent, but after independence, they made sure that they turned most of our states into client states. They made our leaders be their proxies. The exports that were being exported from our nations as it relates to raw materials continued unabated at the least cost because it was cheaper for them. Why was it cheaper? We were supposed to take care of ourselves and sell to them, but unfortunately, they were not selling to us. We were not selling to them value for money, unfortunately. But this has continued and it's still continuing. But I am of the view that, like I said, if we look at this Russia-Ukraine thing holistically, it's time we really have a critical relook of what we want and how we're going to get what we want. What we want is an Africa developed by Africans for Africa. We want a continent where we manifest our destiny and determine and decide how we want to live. Unfortunately, these things are not happening because our leadership lack that vision, strategic thinking to think ahead. Now I will just narrow it down once again to the Gambia. I want to urge the Ministry of Trade to sit down in the next coming 2-3 weeks, strategize and run scenarios. And these scenarios, like I said, are all what ifs. This war will only move when people preempt. And preemptive policy is better than, reactive policy. Public policy in Gambia right now needs to be preemptive. The world is getting ready to enter a new phase that we haven't seen for over 65, 70 years. Therefore, we need to really prepare ourselves and brace ourselves for the worst. And those who don't help themselves will end up being victims. And Gambia should not allow our economy to be victimized by what happens in Russia and Ukraine. So the only way we can do that is to insulate the Gambian economy and safeguard the Gambian economy. And the only way we can safeguard the Gambian economy is to run some simulations and see the optimal that we can do if things get worse. If not, we are in for a long, long, brutal ride, considering how our economy has been underperforming this past 36 months. I am pleading with our government to really look at this Ukraine-Russia issue holistically, put it under the microscope, and look at what's in it for Gambia and how it's going to adversely affect Gambia. And once we identify those things, now we need mitigating factors. And these mitigating factors are what's going to give the Gambian economy a soft landing. Without a soft landing, the impoverished will get poorer. Without a soft landing, the plight of the Gambian will get very miserable. Without a soft landing, chaos and social disorder will be the next thing we will see in Gambia. And these things, if we are not careful, can cause uprisings, because food shortages, incessant price hikes, ultimately, one way or another, creates an angry society. An angry society, one way or another, creates social chaos. Social chaos, one way or another, can topple governments. So to be forewarned, I think, is the right thing. And we need to be proactive and position Gambia so that we can be insulated from this global mess that's about to come. And it's going to come. The ball has already been set in motion. And even if there is a ceasefire in the coming days, it has already affected the supply chains. It has already affected trade routes. It has already affected, because you need to understand, commodities are traded in futures. Right now, the positions that are taken by traders, let's say at the Chicago Board of Trade or in other mercantile markets, it's very crazy. People are worried. And this worry is making people taking bets, be it wheat. And mind you, most of the wheat we eat comes from Russia, because they're one of the biggest in the world. Soybean, the oil, cooking oil, most of us comes from Russia. We're now hearing about embargoes. We're hearing about sanctions. How are all these going to affect us? The government of the Gambia needs to sit down, constitute a group, trade economists, monetary economists, fiscal economists, social, whatever, come together and look at areas that are going to be impacted by the decision made by Putin. We live in a world, and what happens out there affects Gambia positively or negatively. And the only way we can measure, because what you cannot measure, what you cannot quantify, you cannot measure. So therefore, we need to sit down and measure and understand what is coming and how it's going to hit us. For once, I think we need early warning systems, and an early warning system is nothing new, and it's not a rocket science. We need people who are ready to think. We need people who are proactive, and we need people who will do the right thing before the time comes. But I just wanted to start a discussion about what is in it for Gambia and how Gambia will be impacted. Like I said, what is in it for Gambia is our oil blocks that are yet to be auctioned off. They can fetch a premium right now, because most of the refineries, global refineries, are now beginning to look for oil south of the equator, meaning the Arabian Peninsula, Venezuela, and other places. No one wants oil from the Arctic. No one wants oil from places like Norway and others. Not that Norway is in trouble, but the routes leaving Norway and going to places beyond are now all a threat. Threat to submarine, torpedoes, you name it. So right now, it's the time. Like the Wolofs will say, 𝐒𝐄𝐍𝐈𝐎 𝐒𝐿. So prospecting oil south of the equator is now something very attractive, and all this happened in less than a week. So if we position ourselves, I think we will be up for brighter and better days if we position ourselves. But equally, our trade ministry, the central bank, the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Agriculture need to come together and do their what-if scenarios to see how best we can tame inflation amidst global commodity price rise due to this. How we going to substitute things that we bring and we need not bring. We have a lot of work and we have our work cut out, but this is the time. We need to wake up and see what to do before time comes. Gambia is used to waiting until the house is on fire to worry about where to fetch water. So basically, in an analogy, right now we need to know where to fetch water, how much gallons of water we need, so that the moment the fire starts, we can extinguish the fire. And for me, that's the preemptive measure I expect from the government. This is the preemptive measure that the government should take to safeguard the plight of the poor, to safeguard the existing, gains we have made and the recovery we're trying to make post-COVID. Everything will go down if we are not proactive. On that note, I'll just say thank you, and just wanted to share my thoughts because I am of the view that whether we like it or not, the world has changed. Why did the world change? The innocence of the world post-World War II has once again been raised. We thought we were living in a safe world, but now we know that we are back to where we were during the days of Hitler. And these are scary thoughts. A lot of people are looking at the moral aspect of it. Why aren't we talking about Palestine? Why aren't we talking about, other countries that were invaded? I think it's a different game altogether. What was happening in Palestine is ugly, is deplorable, and no one should condone it. But it was contained. What's happening in Ukraine can have a serious domino effect on both sides of the wall, from the Atlantic to the Pacific. What do I mean? It can cascade from Ukraine to the Balkan states to Western Europe. On the other side, it can cascade from the Antarctic to Japan and can eat Hawaii and other places. So it's a different kettle of fish, but I think it threatens the global order. It threatens our way of life as we know it. And because of this, countries need to be careful and countries need to prepare themselves. And in preparing ourselves, we should not only prepare ourselves for our food supplies, we should prepare ourselves for our expenditure patterns. This is not the time for the government of the Gambia to be frivolously spending, because the economic visibility of the global economy is very dim. The global outlook for the recovery we were hoping has been dashed. So in times of uncertainty, like my dear wife Aminata is saying, we need to be frugal. We need to make sure we make investments that will give us social safety nets more so than any other thing. But I believe there are good people in the government. I believe we have people with the critical minds to think. Because the most important thing is not executing, is thinking. And this is one thing that's been lacking in our space. We haven't been thinking. We have been reacting for far too long. This is an opportunity for us to think, prepare ourselves, build safety nets to make sure the poor and the vulnerable are not consumed in this global mix that will really change the economic dynamics of our country, our region, the continent, and the world at large. A great evening to you all. Good night. Thank you.